The metallic corridors of Zerith Prime Detention Facility hummed with a low, mechanical vibration, like the heartbeat of a giant machine. Thick fog crept along the floor, hissing from vents in the walls. Red warning lights pulsed every few seconds, painting the steel chambers in shades of blood and shadow. Beyond the heavy iron doors, prisoners of war were kept in silence, each locked away in their personal cages, each waiting for a fate that was rarely kind. In the farthest cell, behind a barrier of reinforced glass and shimmering energy grids, sat a creature unlike any other captive. She was not human. Her skin shimmered in shades of deep cobalt blue, as though the night sky itself had been painted upon her body. Silver-white hair fell in soft strands over her shoulders, glowing faintly whenever the light passed through it. But it was her eyes that unsettled everyone who looked upon her, eyes of bright violet fire, as if they contained a universe within them. She was known among the guards as Subject A-113. To the soldiers, she was an asset. To the traders who lingered outside the facility, she was property. To the galaxy beyond these cold steel walls, she was a rumor, a whisper of a rare, alien race long thought extinct. And here, within the prison's lockup, she was nothing more than a captive. Her cell was cruelly designed. The floor was made of cold, damp steel, and every time she shifted, the sound of her chains echoed against the walls. Energy cuffs bound her wrists and ankles, glowing faintly with neon blue light. Each time she attempted to pull free, a sharp current of electricity surged through her body, forcing her to the ground. The technology was flawless. Escape, at least to the guards, was impossible. Still, she never begged. She never pleaded. She never screamed, as the others often did when subjected to the same punishment. She sat in silence, her posture straight, her gaze steady, as if she were more than a prisoner, more than the circumstances designed to break her. She radiated a kind of defiance, a quiet strength that unsettled even the most hardened soldier. The atmosphere around her cell carried a strange weight. When other prisoners were brought past her chamber, they would lower their eyes, as though looking at her was forbidden. Some whispered prayers in languages the guards didn't understand. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. She was not just another alien. She was something else, something powerful. And yet here she was, locked away like an animal, her freedom reduced to a number. 5 credits. That was the price flashing in neon holograms outside her chamber. 5 credits. The cost of her life, her freedom, her existence. To the Empire, she was worth no more than the rations given to a soldier for a week. A faint sound broke the silence. The heavy clang of armored boots echoed down the corridor, steady and deliberate. Each step reverberated through the steel floors, sending vibrations into the cages. Prisoners turned their heads, eyes filled with fear or resignation. The fog shifted as the figure emerged from the shadows. It was a soldier, clad in full black armor. His helmet gleamed under the red lights. The insignia of the Empire shimmered faintly across his chest plate. In his hands, he carried a plasma rifle, humming with deadly energy. His presence was commanding, his silhouette sharp, his steps calculated. He was not just a guard. He was a warrior, trained to kill without hesitation. And yet, when he stopped before her cell, something in his posture faltered. His visor reflected her image, her eyes burning like galaxies against the darkness of his armor. She did not move, did not flinch. She simply looked at him, silent and unbroken. In that moment, the prison seemed to grow colder, the air heavier. The galaxy outside might have considered her a slave. The Empire might have reduced her to a price. But as the soldier stood before her, staring into those violet eyes, he felt the weight of something far greater, something he could not yet understand. The soldier's name was Commander Kale Dren, though most of his comrades called him simply the Ghost. In the Empire's military files, his record was flawless, decorated with honors, marked by loyalty and feared by enemies across multiple star systems. He had fought in more campaigns than he could count, reduced entire rebel colonies to ash, and carried out orders without hesitation. Yet inside him, something had begun to shift. Kale had joined the Empire's military as a young recruit, believing the same lies that countless others did. That order must be maintained, that chaos must be eradicated, and that only the strong could bring peace. For years, he fought with conviction. Every battle, every conquest, every prisoner he delivered into chains, he told himself it was for the greater good. But the longer he served, the more the Empire revealed its true face. Kale had seen children torn from their homes, families auctioned off like livestock, entire alien races erased from existence. He had walked through villages where the silence of the dead was louder than the screams that had once filled the air. He carried all of it with him, behind the cold steel of his armor, behind the visor that hid his eyes. Now, standing in front of Subject A-113, he felt the same unease that had haunted him in quiet moments for years. Her gaze pierced straight through his helmet, as though she could see the doubts he kept buried beneath layers of training and obedience. There was no fear in her expression, no hatred, no plea for mercy. Only silence, only power. Kale shifted his grip on the plasma rifle. The weapon hummed softly, its barrel glowing faintly with lethal energy. He reminded himself why he was here: to monitor the prisoner, to ensure she was ready for transport when the traitors arrived. Just another assignment, just another life sold to the highest bidder. But something didn't sit right. His visor displayed her vitals on the HUD: heartbeat steady, oxygen levels normal, neural activity elevated. Nothing unusual, and yet her numbers were too perfect, almost controlled. He frowned behind the mask. 5 credits, he muttered under his breath, glancing at the holographic display outside her cell. The absurdity of it gnawed at him. 5 credits was nothing, a soldier's rations, the cost of a single night's lodging in the slums of the capital. How could this being, radiating such presence, be valued at so little? His comlink crackled in his ear. "Commander Dren," came the voice of Captain Vaylor, his superior. "Report on the asset. Is she contained?" Kale straightened, his voice cold and professional. "Yes, Captain. Contained. No signs of resistance." "Good. The traitors will arrive at dawn. Keep your distance. She's not like the others. Dangerous." The comlink went silent. Kale's eyes flicked back to her. Dangerous. Yes, he could believe that, but not in the way his captain meant. She was not dangerous because of her chains or her alien strength. She was dangerous because of what she represented, a force the Empire could not control, no matter how many locks or cuffs they wrapped her in. He took a step closer to the energy barrier. The faint crackle of the field hummed between them. Her eyes followed his every move, unblinking. For a moment, he considered speaking to her, something he had never done with a prisoner. But the words caught in his throat. What would he even say? Instead, she spoke first. Her voice was soft, melodic, unlike any language he had heard, and yet his mind understood it as though it were his own tongue. "Do you believe in the chains you wear?" Kale froze. His grip on the rifle tightened. "What did you say?" Her lips barely moved, but her eyes burned brighter. "You think you are free because you hold the key, but you are as bound as I am." His chest tightened inside the armor. He forced himself to remain still, his training screaming at him to ignore her words. And yet they echoed in his head, louder than the hum of the plasma rifle, louder than the alarms, louder than his own heartbeat. Kale turned sharply, breaking the eye contact. His boots echoed as he stepped back, but her voice lingered, wrapping around him like a whisper in the fog. He had always been the Empire's weapon, but now, for the first time, he wondered, was he also its prisoner? The detention block sank into silence after Kale's patrol, but the words of the alien woman lingered in his mind like a poison he couldn't purge. "You are as bound as I am." He told himself it was manipulation, a prisoner's trick meant to weaken his resolve. And yet, hours later, as he sat alone in the armory, stripping his plasma rifle apart and reassembling it out of routine, the thought returned again and again. Bound. Was it true? He lived in armor, followed orders that weren't his, marched from world to world to destroy whatever the Empire labeled enemy. His entire life had been dictated by the chain of command. He wore no physical cuffs, but perhaps hers were only more visible than his. Cale clenched his jaw and pushed the thought away. A soldier could not afford doubts. But the prisoner was different. Back in her cell, Subject A, 113 sat in the same unbroken silence, her chains glowing faintly. To the other guards, she was motionless, harmless even. Yet anyone who lingered too long felt it. The sensation of standing before a storm just before it breaks. Late into the cycle, Cale returned to the lockup on another inspection. His boots echoed against the metallic floors as he approached her cell. This time, he didn't stop at a distance. He walked right up to the energy barrier, studying her closely. "You speak my language," he said flatly, breaking the silence. Her head tilted slightly, silver hair shimmering in the dim light. "No," she answered softly. "I speak all languages. Words are nothing more than thoughts given sound. I speak to the thought beneath yours." Cale frowned. That wasn't possible. At least, it shouldn't have been. He tightened his grip on the rifle. "What are you?" Her violet eyes met his without fear. "Not what?" "Who?" "My name is Leora. I am the last of the Eleutheri." The name meant nothing to Cale, but as she spoke it, the air seemed to hum with an energy that crawled over his skin. The Eleutheri, a name lost to the history books, perhaps? Or buried by the Empire itself. "Eleutheri," he repeated. "Your kind doesn't exist. Extinct." A faint smile curved her lips, though it held no joy. "That is what they want you to believe. They burned our cities, poisoned our skies, and sold the survivors like cattle. But extinction cannot be bought." Cale felt his stomach twist. He had heard rumors, old stories whispered in the barracks of races the Empire erased from records. To hear it spoken by one who had lived it was different. "Why 5 credits?" he muttered, more to himself than her. Her smile faded, replaced by a quiet sorrow. "Because they do not know my worth. They cannot measure what they fear. They think chains can bind the Eleutheri, but chains break." As if in answer, the lights flickered above them. The energy field buzzed with static for a moment before stabilizing. Cale glanced up sharply, but she remained still, her hands resting lightly on her knees. "You did that," he whispered. She said nothing. Her silence was answer enough. Cale took a step closer, his voice low. "If you have power, why stay here? Why not escape?" Her eyes sharpened, glowing brighter, almost painful to look at. "Because escape is not the goal. Freedom is not mine alone. When I break these chains, it will not be just for me. It will be for every voice the Empire has silenced. Every life they reduced to numbers. Every world they burned. I do not run. I wait." Cale's pulse quickened. There was conviction in her voice, a weight that pressed against his chest. He had heard many rebels speak of freedom before, but this was different. She did not sound like a desperate prisoner. She sounded like a prophet. "Wait for what?" he asked, almost against his will. Her gaze locked on his, and in that moment Cale felt as though the steel walls around them melted away. He saw flashes, planets engulfed in flame, soldiers marching through ruined streets, skies filled with ships blotting out the stars. And then a spark of light, spreading like fire, unstoppable. "I wait," she whispered, "for the soldier who will see the truth." Cale staggered back, breath caught in his throat. The visions faded, the cell returned, and she sat once again in silence, as though nothing had happened. But Kale knew one thing with certainty. She was no ordinary prisoner. She was a secret the Empire had failed to bury, and now she had chosen him to see it. Kale could not sleep. Inside his quarters, the hum of the ventilation system and the faint rattle of steel pipes were constant companions, but tonight they only made the silence heavier. He lay on the bunk in full uniform, helmet removed, staring at the ceiling with tired eyes. Her voice haunted him. "You are as bound as I am." Her vision burned in his mind. The flames, the armies, the spark of rebellion. Kale rubbed his temples, trying to banish the images, but they clung to him like shadows. He had always prided himself on being disciplined, controlled. A soldier was not meant to question orders. Doubt was weakness, and weakness got men killed. And yet here he was, a commander of the Empire, shaken by the words of a chained alien. The door to his quarters hissed open. Captain Vaylor entered without asking, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He was older, his face a map of scars, his voice as cold as the steel walls around them. "You've been spending too much time near the asset," Vaylor said, narrowing his eyes. "Don't make the same mistake others did. She'll crawl into your head if you let her." Kale sat up. "She spoke to me. In our tongue. She called herself Elethary." Vaylor froze for a moment. Then his expression hardened. "Forget that word. That race is gone. Officially, if the Council hears you repeating it, they'll put you in chains beside her." Kale frowned. Why erase her people? Why keep her alive at all? "Because," Vaylor said darkly, "the Council profits from fear. Traitors will pay to see her broken, to own her, and as long as she is a slave, her people remain nothing but ghosts." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Do not ask questions, Commander. Questions lead to rebellion, and rebellion leads to death." With that, the captain left, the door sealing shut behind him. Kale clenched his fists, rage boiling inside. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. The Empire wasn't just destroying lives, it was erasing history itself. The next day, Kale returned to the detention block. The corridors smelled of ozone and rust, fog curling around his boots as he walked. When he reached her cell, he found her seated in the same stillness, eyes half closed as though meditating. "You're in my head," he muttered. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faint violet. "No, you are in your own head. I only opened the door you locked." Kale gritted his teeth. "If I help you, if I even listen, I'll be branded a traitor." Her chains glowed faintly, energy pulsing along the cuffs. "Then you already know the truth." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Why me? Why not any of the others?" Her gaze held his, unblinking. "Because you still feel. The others are hollow. Their chains are all they know. But your soul resists, even when your body obeys." Her words struck deep. Kale wanted to deny it, to push her away, but he couldn't. The truth was already gnawing at the walls of his loyalty. The sound of approaching boots echoed down the corridor. Another guard appeared, smirking at Kale. "Careful, ghost," he said mockingly. "Stare too long at her, and you'll start believing she's more than a pet." Kale turned sharply, his voice colder than ice. "Get back to your post." The guard laughed and moved on, but Kale's blood burned with anger. He looked back at her. "If what you say is true, if you really have power, then why haven't you broken free?" Her eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. "Because the moment I break these chains, the war begins, and I cannot fight it alone." Kale felt his chest tighten. War. Rebellion. It was madness. And yet, as he stood there, rifle heavy in his hands, he knew he was already standing on the edge of treason. Duty chained him to the Empire. But something deeper, something he could not name, was pulling him toward her. Toward the Trut. The dawn cycle arrived on Zirith Prime, though in the underground prison there was no sunlight, only the sterile flicker of neon lamps and the hum of engines buried deep beneath the metal floors. Today was the day. The traders would come for her. Kale walked the corridors with heavy steps, his armor weighing more than ever. Every clang of his boots echoed like a reminder of the choice ahead. He had not slept. He could not. The image of Leora, chained yet unbroken, haunted him. Her words were carved into his mind. When I break these chains, it will not be just for me. At the detention block, guards were already preparing her for transport. 2 soldiers deactivated the energy barrier, while another attached a collar of glowing red circuitry around her neck. The collar was designed to suppress any surge of power. She did not resist. She only looked up when Kale entered. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange Kale felt his pulse quicken. She was waiting for him, not the traitors. For his choice. Captain Vaylor arrived moments later, flanked by armed escorts. His scarred face twisted into a smirk as he eyed the alien prisoner. 5 credits, he muttered. Ridiculous. I would have paid twice that to watch her burn. Kale's jaw tightened beneath his helmet. Vaylor gestured to the soldiers. Bring her to the docks. The traitors don't like delays. Chains rattled as the guards pulled her forward. She stumbled once, but her eyes never wavered from Kale. She didn't plead. She didn't beg. She only watched, calm, certain. Kale's hands gripped his plasma rifle so tightly that his knuckles ached. His mind screamed with conflict. Obey or resist. As they neared the exit, a sudden tremor shook the facility. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the floor quaked as though struck by distant thunder. Drones in the ceiling whirred to life, scanning the corridors. What in the hell? Vaylor barked, but before he could finish, the chains around Leora's wrists glowed brighter. The energy cuffs sparked, crackled, and then shattered. The soldiers staggered back, raising their rifles, but Kale stood frozen. He saw it clearly. Leora wasn't breaking the chains herself. The tremors, the lights, the power surge, it was all the facility responding to her presence, her very will. Contain her. Vaylor roared. The guards opened fire, plasma bolts streaking through the air. Leora raised her hands, and with a sound like glass shattering, the bolts dissolved into light before reaching her. Kale's heart pounded. In that moment, the choice crystallized. If he fired, he would be no different than the men who enslaved her people. If he lowered his weapon, he was a traitor. Her eyes locked on his one last time, fierce and unyielding. The soldier who will see the truth. Kale lifted his rifle, then spun, firing not at her, but at the guards beside him. Plasma bolts ripped through armor, dropping the men where they stood. Vaylor turned in fury. Dren, what are you? Kale didn't let him finish. He shot the captain point blank, the blast slamming him against the wall. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of smoke. The remaining soldiers hesitated, shocked, before Kale barked. Stand down or join him. Most fled. A few raised weapons, only to be met with Leora's glowing gaze. Their rifles melted in their hands, and they ran in terror. The lockup was chaos, alarms wailing, but Kale felt an eerie calm. He lowered his rifle and approached her. You said you can't fight alone, he said, voice rough. So don't. For the first time, a true smile touched her lips, not of triumph, but of recognition. Together, they moved toward the hangar. Drones swarmed overhead, red eyes flashing. Kale gunned them down while Leora lifted her hand, tearing control panels apart with invisible force. Explosions lit the corridors, shaking the foundations of the prison. By the time they reached the docks, the entire facility was burning. Kale keyed a stolen shuttle, its engines roaring to life. He turned to her. Where do we go? She looked out at the stars beyond the hangar doors, her eyes blazing with violet fire. To the worlds they think they own. To the slaves they think are broken. To the voices they tried to silence. Kale hesitated, then nodded. His chains had finally broken. As the shuttle blasted into the void, the prison collapsed behind them in a storm of fire and steel. For the Empire, it was the loss of an asset. For the galaxy, it was the birth of rebellion. And for Kael Dren and Leora of the Elethary, it was only the beginning.